It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast as we talk your property news 7 days a week, which means that we're talking to all of the real estate professionals right around the country. Hundreds of these interviews that we do in any given year. And if you want the experts, you'll find them right here. If they are important, we are talking to them. And it's a Wednesday morning, December the 11th. This is really interesting because we've never actually talked about heritage and lifestyle properties, ever. We've never covered this. And the other day, I noticed that there was this absolutely stunning property. If you're into mansions, and I'll get our next guest to talk a little bit about this. This is the first time that this mansion has been offered since 1939. And it's a fairly big sort of a mansion, almost 700 square metres. But the point of our next guest is just to find out a little bit about this heritage market, because it does exist. As I say, it's an area that we've never discussed. So let's welcome in Dominic Romeo, and he is from Circa Heritage and Lifestyle Property. And good morning to you, Dominic. As I say, we've never spoken about this before. You were telling me that you cover all of Victoria as well as Tasmania. So you're right up to speed. You're the guy to talk to.
Yeah, well, look, I cover two states, like you said, the whole of Victoria and Tasmania, and I only specialise in historic houses.
Just to give our listeners a sense of how big this market is, how many properties would you be trading in any 1 year?
Look, I probably only do around 20, which isn't a lot. They are very specialised, and because I cover large ground, I'm doing more of the high-end, grander type homes. But it's not just grand homes, because I've got different levels of buyers, ones that are looking for restoration projects as opposed to ones that are fully restored. You know, it's very specialised. So, like I said, I only really sell about 20 a year.
So when you say that people are looking for a bit of a reno, a specialised project, I mean, this would be major money that they would be looking at, because some of these properties are rather large, are rather grand, and they're from a period where they were just very big.
True. And like I said, I've got different levels because there are serial renovators looking for quite detailed restoration projects. They're looking for properties that are, need a lot of work from the roof right down to the foundations. But that's a very particular market. But there are, the ones that've got the dream or the romance of owning the historic house, the grand house, but they don't want to tackle major structural issues on a house. So they're the ones that kind of, I guess, look for the semi-restored to the restored houses.
And do you find that when you take somebody into a property, you'll know within the first 10 to 15 seconds, I would imagine, they walk in and they go, wow, this is amazing. And then you think to yourself, yeah, I think this person's probably up for this property.
It kind of starts before you get to the property, because I have lengthy conversations of what they're specifically looking for, what they have looked at. So it gives me a good gauge on the type of property and, the level of restoration or the size of home that they're after. But certainly when they walk into a grand house, look, they're overwhelmed, they're in awe. It's usually what they're after, especially with, the grand scale of the home. But then as you go further into the home, you sort of talk and look at the sorts of work that's required in some of the homes. Sometimes that changes their perception. Look, I guess it's because of my knowledge in historic houses, because I've been in that field in a lot of different capacities. I can talk at length and putting their minds at ease, whether it's to do with restoration costs or, dealing with houses that are on state registers, how to deal with authorities, how to deal with tradies, all that sort of thing. I can talk for hours with them, and that helps formulate, which direction they go to.
Have you had anybody that have said to you, look, Dominic, I want something that's kind of like a Downton Abbey?
Yes, I do, but they're quite rare. The very grand ones, like your 30, 40-room houses. The problem is sometimes they do come on the market, but they come with, they might come with 1, 2, 5,000 acres, which prohibits the person that wants the house. That's the problem. Whereas most people that want the house, they're really after your 20, 50 acre gardens or allotments. Yes, I do have people that want the grand house, and I've had people that waited 3, 4, 5 years to get the right property, and if they've got the patience, I will find them one.
In Downton Abbey, they've got the pulley, the strings where they ring the bell, and there's a central area where those bells go off. Are there any properties in Australia that have got that sort of system?
Yeah, the servants' bells. I do come into historic houses where they're very intact and things like servants' bells are still there. You don't see a lot of it, but, there are very intact original houses that I walk into.
What about the romancing of the whole idea? Like somebody has this notion in their mind, this would be so grand, so romantic, they've sort of run away with the idea. Then they meet Dominic, and Dominic says, yes, well, this property is going to require this, and this. They haven't really sort of thought that far down the track. They're more sort of thinking about, how wonderful this would be, perhaps without the cost associated with it.
Yeah, true. I'm a restorer of historic country houses. My wife and I are. We've been doing it for close to 40 years. I've restored 20 to 50 room houses. So I basically practice what I preach, and I'm still restoring. When you relay all that detailed information on how to speak to heritage authorities, how to deal with tradespeople, how to deal with councils, it really does ease their mind, because if they walk into a big house and you can't talk about it, they'll go off and do their research, they'll speak to the wrong people, it'll be overwhelming, and they walk away. It's just too much for them. Even when people buy houses off me, a year or two down the track, they still pick my brains as to who do you contact for someone who puts up wallpaper, or who underpins it. I guess I provide that service. I mean, I don't charge for it. I just provide that service because I know they're trying to do the right thing. So there is an obsession out there for early colonial history and houses. So, and there is that romance of renovating. I mean, everyone's got that dream of renovating, and it's not as complicated as some people think it is. But like I said, if you can steer that person and put their mind at ease with all that detail, it just makes the process easier.
You're the guru by the sound of it. At the start, you were saying that you're covering all of Victoria and Tasmania. How many properties of these types have you got on the market at the moment?
At the moment, I've got 15, but there's about 6 that are about to go unconditional, or they have sold. They're waiting for settlement. And they're all historic. Like I said, I only deal with historic houses.
Yes, and some of these grand homesteads, they're in sort of far-flung areas, because one of the properties that I was talking about at the start, nearly 700 square metres, hasn't been on the market since 1939 in a place called Gringy-Galgona. I'd never heard of Gringy-Galgona. Where exactly is that?
Well, I haven't either until the vendors called me, but it's a little hamlet of about 50 people, and it's behind the Grampians in Western Victoria. It is one of the grand houses of the Western District of Victoria. So it's about 360 kilometres away from Melbourne. So it's about a 3.5, 4 hour drive. So it's about 50 kilometres north of Hamilton, which is a larger town. Originally, the house was on around 90,000 acres in its heyday. So a lot of these homes had large acreage, but over the years they get chopped up. So Gringy-Galgona now it's got 55 acres.
Wow. Okay, so Gringy Galgona, there you go, sitting there very quietly, has been for decades and decades. First time on the market since 1939. Well, great to sort of find out a little bit about this, Dominic. As I say, you're a man that knows this industry all too well by the sound of it, and a serial restorer as well. I'd love to have a look at some of the photos of that, so perhaps you can send that through to us. Enjoy your Wednesday, and thank you so much for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
Thank you very much.
Decode the property market with insider knowledge and insights to better navigate your real estate journey on the Real Estate Podcast.
And right now it is time for another property tip. We love giving these property tips out. I learn a little bit, you learn a little bit, and I think the agent always loves imparting some of it. And we're catching up with Jay from Endeavour Hills again. And good morning to you, Jay. You've got an interesting one, because I think when people normally want to sell, they want to spruce up their property. You say Endeavour Hills, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, it's not always the case. Not always the case, because what happens, we're in an older area. Houses are typically now about 40 years old in Endeavour Hills and getting to that age where they need to be spruced up. You have some people that might say, let's renovate the kitchen, and they go and watch The Block or whatever their favourite renovation show is, and all of a sudden you've got a white kitchen with some black trimmings, and all of a sudden it makes the laundry look really old, or the mission brown paint now doesn't look as good, or now the bathrooms need to be done. And we can have vendors sort of spending $150,000 on the renovation, which looks amazing by the end of it. But I'd always say for every dollar that you spend, you kind of want to get $2.50 to $3 back. And if you're going to spend $150,000 on the renovation for your 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, well, you're not typically going to get $250,000 or $300,000 back in the Endeavour Hills market. So it can kind of be a moot point around what it is you're actually trying to achieve with the renovation. If you're going to live in it, fantastic, do it, enjoy it, knock yourself out. But if you're doing it to make a couple of dollars, trying to second guess the colour palette the buyer might like can sometimes bring you undone.
Yeah, that is a very valid point. Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out for us this morning, and enjoy your day in Melbourne.
Thank you so much. All the best.
I know that we're all expecting this to sort of stay the same, but you never can tell. You've seen the hot decision just made.
Probably the most expected result for the year. The RBA's held the cash rate at 4.35%. I don't think there were any commentators really thinking there was going to be a change at this time of the year.
Yeah, of course, the RBA, there's no way that they were going to make a decision prior to the Christmas New Year spend, which I think they're probably a little bit nervous heading into Christmas New Year, because there seems to be, I said this a couple of times now, people are buying, you see them carrying lots of packages in their arm. They're not just window shopping this year. So I think that retail spend could be quite a number.
We had the recent Black Friday sales here. There was a cyber sale here, and retail was quite buoyant through that time. I don't think there was any way there was going to be any change. I think we're still 5 or 6 or 7 months off even a cut.
We are more than just a real estate podcast. Follow each week all of the main talking points and know your property.
And we'll start with those interest rates, because they remained high. Predicted rate cuts last year, they did not materialise, with the cash rate holding at 4.35% due to persistent inflation. But affordability, as you said, remained strained, didn't it?
Without question. We've got one of the most unaffordable housing markets in the world. Sydney sits at second in the world for least affordable. Melbourne, despite the recent movements in terms of median prices, sits at 7th in the world. Getting into the marketplace is incredibly difficult, and comparatively what you can realise in Perth or Adelaide or Brisbane is a fantastic home at still a relatively more affordable entry price point.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.